you feeling? We're ready to go. Talk some Michigan football. Monday, July the 8th, we kick this one off, and hope you're keeping cool out there. It's a hot one here in the state of Michigan. We also hope you had a good holiday weekend. A lot of people Thursday, Friday, taking a whole 4 days, and then had to go back to work today. That's never any fun, but hopefully wherever this is finding you is finding you full of joy and happiness. Now, when it comes to Michigan, you could say, and football fans in general, that these are the dog days, and I would agree with that. I mean, these are the dog days, but it's also, if you're a big-time Michigan football fan, you can find things to talk about. I've been doing this pod for 3 years, and I've been asked a few times, have there been shows that you go on where you're like, well, I don't really know what we're going to talk about. Not really. But I also have to include that the last 3 years have been like the greatest 3-year run. And you can start saying, 95, 96, 97. You can go back to the 70s in there, had a couple different runs in there, but whatever. I mean, it rivals any great run that Michigan's ever had. And then it was just chock full also of very newsworthy and tons of different things to talk about. From the first year of Michigan just going up and, finally getting over that hump. And I mean, the story, getting into the college, beating Ohio State for the first time in 8 years, getting to the college football playoff, getting to Indy, and then following it up the next year, you had the quarterback battle royale at the beginning of the year. Michigan goes undefeated. They get back to the college football playoff. They beat Ohio State again on the road. That was great. They win the Big Ten championship again on the road. And then it looked like, I wasn't thinking it was a cakewalk against TCU, but Michigan was a pretty big favorite. And then it was a disaster. Yeah, it was a disastrous game. All the turnovers, everything that went on. And then, last year, and if it wasn't just for the drama of an undefeated season and that culminated in a national championship, you had all this drama with the Big Ten office and the suspensions and everything that went into that. That thing was totally blown out of proportion, as we all know. And as I don't know if I predicted that there would be a day that we would look back and say, they really made a heck of a lot bigger deal out of all that than it was. But, it's always going to be talked about. And, we'll probably always talk about it as well. What are we talking about here today? Well, we've got Colston Loveland to get to. I was looking through the Michigan record book, and when I landed on the tight end part of that record book, I started looking at some of the numbers that Colston Loveland could achieve. We'll get to some of those coming up straight ahead. I just talked about this being a slow time. We'll bring it at the end. We'll see where you're at with how slow this is and if there's anything to talk about with Michigan. Spoiler, there is. But in the summer, we always start with recruiting, and it'd been a little bit like, June, there were a lot of recruits. Michigan was getting a lot, and people were feeling it. I don't know if there's such. It feels like it, but is there really, like, during a game? I do believe in momentum. Do I believe in recruiting momentum? Each individual player has to make their decision. I'm thinking about it in real time now. I don't. Although I say it just like everyone else. Oh, momentum, going with recruiting. Just because they get one day doesn't mean that's not like. I don't think that helps. Is there really a kid sitting out there? He's looking at his computer. He's kind of torn. He says, "Oh, Michigan just got a commitment. Because the iron's hot, why don't I jump in there? Maybe if there's relationship, but I don't know." It's always been an interesting thing to talk about in sports. I really believe in momentum. I could sit here in baseball. You get one little single hit, you get somebody else, you start moving the line. And I've watched it, I've felt it at a game. Certainly momentum. Football, yeah, you score those points, and everybody starts believing, and you do. You pick up a momentum. Basketball for sure. You start hitting some shots. It's contagious. I think hockey, it feels like it's the same way. Although hockey, you can be dominant a whole period and then come out and be dominant for like 19 minutes of the second period. Then they get one goal and you're like, oh, all that momentum. I say all that. There was a quarterback that played for the Lions who was on the radio, and he's still a broadcaster. Gary Danielson, he was always adamant that nope, there's no such thing as momentum. And it was never a fun thing to listen to, but Gary's theory, and you got it with him as a quarterback. He had to forget the next play if he had a really good play. It's not like he was going in there patting himself on the back, or if he had made a bad pass. So he always just was looking forward to the next play. And I can see whatever works for you. If the value, if you're a football player, you might have, two highs and highs, lows, and, you might not buy into the momentum. But I don't. I'm like a Gary Danielson when it comes to recruiting momentum, for whatever that's worth. Now, here's some of the names and the targets. Andrew Olish. What's today? What's going on with Olish? What's up? Is he changed his, today is the 8th. Let's go. I did see yesterday that Sharon Moore had put out the Michigan look-see and blue dot and the block M, which usually indicates good news, that maybe it's Olish, and you have Wright coming up and Babalola, who we continue to monitor and feel good about for Michigan. Look at this. I like how they're sitting there. 6 o'clock from VV. 6 o'clock for Olish and his decision. That's good. Another decision coming up is one that Michigan may be getting into the flip game. There is a defensive back from Florida who a long time ago, last year, a 4-star safety out of West Orange in Florida committed to Notre Dame. Michigan has stayed on this. You can be a commitment, just like all of Michigan's commitments right now. They're getting contacted, all of it, to flip. And Michigan, the Mesa Blue Review is feeling pretty good about Michigan being able to flip this kid from Notre Dame. So let's keep an eye on Taylor, and if Michigan would be able to flip Taylor from the Irish to Michigan. And if you're not, this is, you can cast your net for 100 different players, and there's still some verbals that are going to be out there that you're still, if you see any, I don't know exactly how it works, but if you see any kind of hesitation, or you watch their social media, they put a little, whatever it is. Or maybe it's just, you just keep working them. You just keep working the phones. And maybe if it, the staff feels like they don't have the momentum, I think the staff, Michigan staff, feels a lot like the Michigan fans. I mean, the Michigan fans, you get a verbal, it's like a party. Woo! You feel great about the season. You feel great about the future. You just feel good. You feel like it's a great day. Then you get another one. It's just like, wow, man, let's just keep it rolling. Let's get 50 recruits. And you realize you're only going to get like 25 or so, but you're like, let's get 50. Let's keep this party going. I think the staff feels the same way. They get a commitment. They're sitting around pumping their fists and dapping each other up. And, then Sharon Moore, takes his phone out and, he's sending the emojis out, and he knows that's going to affect all of you. And, you're going to get all excited about it and everything else. But that's where we sit with recruiting. Michigan waiting on Olish here today. It's an Olish Monday, Michigan, Alabama. Oh, the tight end. That leads us right into Colston Loveland in a moment, and then the wide receiver, and then still Babaloa, and then keeping an eye on this flip when it comes down to it. Let's get some of the feedback that is coming in before we talk about Colston Loveland. Scott says that Johnson, Derek Moore, Colston Loveland will all be All-Americans. Well, when I look at this, I agree that I don't think Derek Moore is going to be named preseason, and you're saying at the end, and you're saying that Mason Graham is not going to be. A little bit confusing on this. I like Derek Moore as much as anyone. I think everyone loves Loveland and Johnson, but not to have Mason Graham in here seems like you have made an omission in the first bit of feedback that we have over there. So that's where we're at. Scott saying that Andrew's brother, Rocky Balboa. I love it. I love how that's going to go. D Original sees multiple games this season, rushing for over 300 yards. Yeah, D Original, I hope so. I think that everybody's question is about the Michigan quarterback position. And if it is going to be Alex Orji, there's going to be a lot of rushing from Alex Orji. It's going to be a lot of rushing from Donovan Edwards. Michigan's going to be hammering the ball with Khalil Mullings, and who else knows with the stable of backs that they have. But those two for sure, and then those three if Orji's the man at the controls. And I still believe, as we sit here on July the 8th, that it is going to be Alex Orji at the controls against Fresno State and also against Texas. And I do believe that it's going to be Orji the entire year. And I don't think that there's going to be any kind of quarterback rotation or, oh, you're going to go to this guy. And I know I was talking about this last week with Jim Scarcelli, who feels like Michigan's got multiple starting quarterbacks on the roster. That would be great news. I don't really feel like that myself. I'm not even sure about Orji, to tell you the truth. And I'm talking about being a championship level quarterback, but you also have to give a guy a little bit of a break, whoever it is, I say Orji, as a first-time starter, and let him develop as the season goes on, even though he's got to really bring it against Texas and play really well. And it feels like it's going to be a huge key, not only for Michigan season, but for whoever is the quarterback for that game. If you missed last week, I made an adjustment in my season rankings, and the adjustment is I still have Michigan at 10-2, making the college football playoff. I feel good about that. That's my prediction right after the season, after I was taking a look at it. But I had the losses against Oregon and OSU because Michigan has to come together with their offensive line, because they have a new quarterback, because they have 10 new starters on their offense. I think that it is going to take a little bit of time. And if I'm going to predict the loss, which I am going to predict Michigan lose 2 games. I know that for you don't like that. Some people would never even consider, predicting Michigan to lose a game. But in this case, I am, as a season prediction, I am thinking that Michigan is going to beat Oregon. That's the good news. But I think that they're going to drop that game against Texas. Now, if it does play out that way, that's actually better news for Michigan. You get that early loss, you can overcome that. And then obviously, if you go undefeated in the Big Ten, how I have it, Michigan would be 8-0, 9-0. They would be 11-0. I'm sorry. Not in the Big Ten. They wouldn't be. They'd be USC, Minnesota, Washington, Illinois, MSU, Oregon, Indiana, I could have just subtracted 3 from 12, and it would be 8-0 at heading in with Ohio State, and maybe they would already be in the Big Ten championship game, feeling like that, and they just need to win 1 out of 2, and they'd be in the college football playoff. And a lot of different things could happen. I'm kind of feeling like that. Scott asking a question I missed. He wants a forecast on Taylor and the big tight end Olish. I feel good about Olish. If I had to put a forecast in, I did not put one in. Taylor, I just saw that news this morning, so I need some more background on Taylor. And when I just see a flip and, Michigan's in on it. But if I'm going to put a forecast in, I'm going to put one on Olish before I put one on anyone else. Winter Garden, Florida is a nice area. Well, it feels like not Winter Garden, but it feels like Florida out here today. Valiant with some background on Yvonne Taylor, saying Notre Dame screwed themselves by getting 2 other safety commitments. They didn't make him a priority, and Michigan did. Nice job, Valiant. Valiant sounds like he was putting his forecast in. Ryan, if you love feeling up and down, borderline bipolar, then recruiting is for you. Yeah. There's a lot of people that don't follow recruiting, and what they are missing is this roller coaster that you just jump in with no seatbelt, and you're blindfolded, and it's at night. And, some of us, kind of like that ride. It's a thrill. You just get on, woohoo! You're going on, you're hanging on for your life. And there's others, no way. There's no way that they're getting involved in all of that. But you're right, Ryan. That's a good way to look at it. Bo is talking about Brady Priestcorn. Put in some work in the offseason, put on good weight, and still has lots of time to go before the season kicks off. Early enrollee, I think he gets plenty of real reps this season. The Michigan tight end position, Bo, is loaded. And that's why someone like Olish is looking at Michigan and thinking they have a real pipeline up there in Ann Arbor. And what Loveland is going to do this year, and I'm sure, showing Olish the Loveland highlights, packaging them up in all kinds of different ways and sending them to him and saying, hey, this could be where you are at. And then you just, for the tight end position for Michigan, Marlon Klein, who was talked about being one of the faster players. I mean, guy's 6'5", 250, one of the fastest players on the team coming out of spring. He's a good player to predict that would really break out this year, considering how many tight ends Michigan does play. And, Klein's been waiting his turn. You mentioned about the early enrollees. Priestcorn might have been, I don't remember right off the top of my head, but what I do remember is that the tight ends that did play, both Deacon Tonelli and Zach Marshall, those guys were on drag routes. Both of those guys had catches in the spring game. The tight end position, I got Hansen and Priestcorn coming in this year. Unless there's an injury, Bo, I doubt that either of those guys are going to be able to get on the field. I don't know if Loveland would have got on the field. Remember, they had Eric All, the guy scored the huge touchdown against Penn State, and you're going in, you're thinking, man, Michigan has the best tight end combo in the country. Next thing you know, All's getting hurt, and they had to rely on Loveland. It happens sometimes that way, but it's not like anybody's down on Priestcorn. Priestcorn looks a lot like Colston Loveland. They're just bringing in guys that are 6'5", 250. Doug says, it appears the portal has taken much of the recruiting hype away. We can still fill holes when transfers smell playing time. Yeah, the portal's part of it now, and Michigan got 9 players via the portal, 10 last year. So yeah, how you're adding your players and at different times. I don't know. I guess depends, what you're how hype you want to be, how hype it's going to get. As said, how you deal with recruiting, it's got to be your own. You could take your advice from me, but it's like taking advice from somebody at the dice table that's like won 3 or 4 in a row, and they're just following somebody. And the crowds around the table, everybody's chanting, the chips are stacking up, every people are pumped, and your buddy's like, "Let's walk away." You're like, "What? I'm not walking away from anything." But that's the portal, right? Is what's going on. All right. Bo has Mason Graham for his July Heisman. Couple sacks, forced fumble, difference in the Texas game. Hail. Yeah. Was there, I was thinking, we know we've had defensive players that have been up for it. Adamakin Sue could have won the Heisman Trophy when he was playing for Nebraska. He played awesome. I voted, I don't have a vote, but I vote anyways for myself, keep the vote. But Jordan Godzilla for Georgia 2 years ago. Jordan Davis, is that his name? He made my 3. And oh boy, that Spartan fans were mad because I also had Hutchinson in there. I had a couple defensive players. I had Hutchinson. I had Godzilla in there, and I didn't have K9. And all the Spartan fans accused me of being anti-Michigan State, which I understand why they would say that. And that one really hurt. That's Michigan State's. I think to the day I die, if it's in another 40 or 50 years or whatever, it'll be the last week. Some Michigan State fans going to say, yeah, K9 should have gone to New York. Okay. I mean, that's their one. They really take that one hard. And I tried. I think it's not being a Michigan homer. If I can recall how it went, K9 scored 5 touchdowns against Michigan. I actually had him number 1 on my Heisman list after the Michigan game. But then after the Michigan game, he got hurt a little bit. He dropped. Then, he had this big moment. Got to make the big plays and the big moments. And then he had the game against Ohio State. And he was hurt, but he didn't do anything in that game at Michigan State. So I dropped him down a little bit more. Meanwhile, other players like Aiden Hutchinson in big games were out there making a name for themselves and closing fast. K9 was like John Vandeveld in the U.S. Open that one year when he, had a 3-shot lead on, going into 18 or whatever that was. We're not going to get by a show from now until the end of August without somebody making a reference to Jack Tuttle. And James and Scott talking about Tuttle coming back, and James says, as a GA, maybe. Richard talking about an offensive lineman, Bishop. Looks like a great next one for Michigan. Let's see. Old VV is talking about somebody that I don't know, putting a Yvonne Taylor flip. And he's a Notre Dame insider. Well, sounds like he knows what he's talking about. Yeah, Valiant, you know what I mean? Notre Dame didn't screw anything up. They're stomping us in recruiting, actually. Yeah, there's a lot of teams that stomp Michigan in recruiting. And it's been a couple months, and here's Hadley. He's really trying to be a regular now, so be happy. He's really looking forward to Brady Hart coming. The quarterback battle starting next year should be electric. Well, so we're just talking about Michigan as a quarterback next year committed from Florida named Carter Smith from Fort Myers. That is a nice area. I want to recruit, as an aside. If I was somehow they said, let's bring a podcaster on the recruiting staff and we're going to allow that podcaster to recruit an area of the country. And somehow they picked me out, say, I want to recruit Florida. I want to go down to Fort Myers. I want to go down to Winter Garden or whatever else. And so first, Hadley, you've got Carter Smith. He's a 2025. The year's 2024. We're going to wait 2025. This kid's coming in as a freshman. Hart, who you're talking about, who has the great name Brady Hart, is the first commitment for the 2026 class. Hadley, some people that follow recruiting even think that is going a little bit too far. When you start talking about recruiting battles that are going to take, or not even recruiting battles, quarterback battles that are going to happen in 2 or 3 years. But yeah, sure. Carter Smith, Brady Hart, Alex Orji is a junior, but he could play 3 more years, right? So I don't know, 3 more years of Orji. That's what I would like to see. And then you have Hart and you have Carter Smith, who are red shirts, and then they're freshmen, they don't play just a little bit, and then they're ready to go as sophomores, unless they're like super special, and that happens where you get the super special ones that get on the field even as freshmen. We can go through them, but it is, Hadley, it is nice to see you as a regular, not just a once in a 72-year occurrence. No, that's it. Let's go. There is Andres. That sweet swing with his the former feedback artist known as GMA. He's there. Scott saying that Prescorn did get a little burn in the spring game. Moose says the Irish fans are mad. What's new with those guys? What's new? They just send the collection plate around a little bit and see what they can do down there in South Bend. Olish looks a lot like Loveland. Yes, he does. I mean, he's built like him. And if you're saying like he looks like him, you say, hey, I didn't really, although I know I've seen Loveland in person. I've seen pictures of Olish. I didn't really go like, oh, hey, they look alike. But that's what you're saying. But you could be talking about he plays a lot like him, but he could look like him too. That can happen. Doug making the statement, which sounds true when I said they probably won't play Hanson or Prescorn. Doug says they'll play one and redshirt one. I could see that. Moose would not only want to see not only wants to see an Olish commit, but a Taylor flip. A flip and a commitment in one day. I don't want to get, I'll say that's fine. And, look, I wouldn't mind Olish just having his day. Olish having his day. And then because it's later on in the day, he gets all day Tuesday. And then Taylor flips, makes it official, a flip official on Wednesday. Oh. LTM's talking about back-to-back. I thought about back-to-back. My focus is more on getting to the college football playoff. If Michigan would be able to do that. And then, of course, anything can happen. But I do think, LTM, you just think just further out than I do. Because I do know that if Michigan makes the college football playoff, there's going to be a lot of people talking about why not us? Why not go back-to-back? Why can't we win this tournament? Why can't we go back to back. I would like that. I would like, since I'm just started out this show, recapping the last 3 years and things to talk about and everything else. Beating Ohio State is where it's at. And somehow, and even though I'm predicting a loss here heading into the season, a fourth time in a row, it's just, that would be nice. But, they don't have to, and then they can play them twice. Beating them twice. The goal is to win the national championship. The next goal is getting in the college football playoff. You get an automatic bid if you win the Big Ten. So you can just say, win a national championship, win the Big Ten. They take the top 4 rated. You're always going to get an automatic bid if you win the Big Ten. Win the Big Ten, win the national championship, beat Ohio State. Beat Ohio State twice. I mean, should that be the goal? Beat Michigan State? That feels like a foregone conclusion this year, but I need to mention them because I got a little bit too confident on Halloween week of 2020 when I was not taking MSU seriously, and Michigan lost that game. Let's just get back on track. Goals, LTM, win the national championship, win the Big Ten, which gets you into the college football playoff, beat Ohio State once or twice. It's a little bit different now that we're in here. People are following Notre Dame fans. According to Notre Dame fans, Taylor isn't any good anymore. That's recruiting. That's how recruiting works. You lose a guy, he's not any good. I know that. Scott taking a shot at someone that I don't know who he is, some Notre Dame insider. Many teams stomped us the last few years. He's talking about recruiting. Let it go. Yeah, I'm there with you on that. Let's see. I'm working down. You know what I did for the first time? I rewatched one of the shows this weekend, and I usually rewatch. I have a phone or I have a tablet, but I actually watch it on a computer. And then I was watching the rundown that I have. I didn't know everyone had the actual rundown where they could see what everybody's saying, but it makes sense because people argue, and now I see how it comes. It's not always necessary for me, but do you like me putting up and responding to what people are saying? I would think that you would, but that was just something new this week. Okay, it is on to Loveland. Now, all this talk of flips and it being flip season and Olish and he's on the verge. You want to know, you don't go where Roy Tom is or whatever anybody was talking about. That would be a consideration if you were, a big Notre Dame fan. You're not. You're a big Michigan fan. This is the place to be. The Maize and Blue Review. They're the real ones. Go to michigan.rivals.com. We'll see you over there on the Den. I was up, posting stories at 6:30 in the morning on Sunday. I was like, let's get this. As I was looking through the record book, there were a couple other things that jumped out to me. Somebody last week, let's see if I can remember his name here in a second, but I was talking about Michigan being number 1 offense, number 1 defense, and he was like, Michigan had the 14th ranked offense, and I was like, I don't think that's right. But then in the end, I went back and checked the numbers. That guy was right. Anderson, I think his name is. Anderson. And that's if you kept all of the group of 5 in there and everything else. If you just looked at Big Ten games, Michigan had the number 1 offense. Michigan had the number 1 defense in the Big Ten. Now, it's going to be much more difficult to do this year because they have USC at Washington, Oregon, at Ohio State. It's going to be more difficult to be number 1 offense and defense in the Big Ten. But that's where I got that from. There was a little bit of confusion. But did you know that in the country, Michigan committed the fewest amount of penalties. They just committed 3 per game. That's big, especially when Scar 2 weeks ago put all of the pre-snap movement that Michigan does. All of that, but I think they were number 2 with pre-snap movement. Number 2 pre-snap movement, and then they committed the fewest amount of penalties. That's the sign of a well-coached team. And then the other thing that they were number 1 in the country last year, look, they were a championship team. You're going to be number 1 in some things. They were number 1 in turnover ratio. Phil Steele contends that, does he call it arbitrary turnover ratio? It's hard to predict. I don't know. I always bought that from him. But if you have a really good defense, guys that are good at, picking off passes and ripping the, opponent's ball, that should be something. You have running backs that are very good at protecting the ball. Same thing with a quarterback. You should have a positive turnover ratio, a positive plus minus. I don't know how arbitrary that is. Phil contended, I think he contends that it is, but Michigan was number 1 in turnover ratio last year in the country, and they were number 1 also in committing the fewest amount of penalties. Not the fewest yardage. I think they were in the top 5 for that particular stat. But those are 2 things. Don't commit penalties, secure the ball, take the ball away. It's a good recipe for success, if you know what I'm saying. And I know that you do know what you're saying. Let's see. Okay. Slippin' Jimmy. It's funny, Slippin' Jimmy, that you come on here and talk about Michigan having the number 2 recruiting class at the moment. I think Rivals has them at 21, but I didn't look this morning, so it could have slipped to 22. But I have just completed my second viewing of Better Call Saul just over this weekend. And I find that funny because this is the first time that somebody comes in and calls themselves Slippin' Jimmy. I think he's calling himself Slippin' Jimmy McGill after Saul Goodman. Saul Goodman, before he was Saul Goodman, was James McGill. And before James McGill went to Albuquerque, he lived, where did he live? I don't remember. Milwaukee, maybe? But that was his nickname because he was a con artist. That's it. Okay, let's get to Loveland. That's what happened to Michigan last year. They maxed out in recruits and didn't get much after that. I don't know what you're talking about there. Okay, that happens. So looking through the record book for Michigan, you come to the tight end portion of the record book, and you look for receptions for a tight end in a season. Number 1 on that list, Benny Jopru back in 2002. Number 2, the great Jake Butt in 2015. Here's Jim Mandich. Everybody remembers him from the 69 team. Didn't he have a touchdown against Ohio State in that game? I believe he did. Funchess. Butt gets 2 times in the top 5 in receptions per season. Can Colston Loveland get 9 more receptions this year to be the number 1 tight end in Michigan history with 54 more or more catches in a season? Yes. I feel like I'm pretty confident that Colston Loveland is going to do that. Colston Loveland is going to get more targets. He is going to get more catches. He is the number 1 option in the passing game. I feel like Colston Loveland will get 54 catches at least this year, and he will come away at number 1 in the Michigan record book in receptions per season. So that's the way I feel about it, taking a look there. There have been many times last year that folks, I just see Jake Butt because Jake Butt is asked that a lot because he's on the Big Ten Network now. And what makes Loveland so good? And I've heard some of the coaches what makes Loveland so good. Butt was talking about Loveland's not only his route running, but just his ability to get where you are on the route and being able to make a cut, a precise cut. Great route running and being able to make precise cuts, which I'm kind of the same thing. But you say, well, why is Loveland so good? He runs like a wide receiver and he's 6'5", 250. And he is a precise route runner that makes great cuts. One of the coaches was also talking about his ability to bend and contort his body where tight ends normally you just think about big tight end, he's down there, just makes himself available and then boom, just sucks the ball in there. Loveland, more like a wide receiver, he's contorting his body on the seam 20 yards down the field. He's able to really bend and really able I think it would be his catch radius is extraordinary. These are the things, the speed at his size, the route running, and then his catch radius is amazing. That's what is making him an All-American candidate. And this is why when you put up the record book about catches and receptions in a season, you think, yes, if get him the ball, he certainly can break Benny Joppru's one season record of receptions in a season of 53. That can happen. Receiving yards. Well, Loveland last year had 649. He's going to need 100 more if he wanted to get the receiving yards in a single season. You say 100 yards, that's a lot. It is, and yet he is going to be, Loveland again, the number one option. Now, if you were watching last week's show when I was making the orgy predictions, at first I had him for 190 yards per game, but then mixed in with the completion percentage and how many times I actually thought he was going to throw the game. I had to make an adjustment. I think Michigan is only going to be throwing for around 135 yards per game, but I do believe that Loveland is going to be the number one target. I think this is achievable for receiving yards. Slippin' Jimmy doesn't see it. Okay. I do. I think that he could achieve this one as well. Could he get, here's the next one, the hat trick. You have receiving touchdowns in the season. Eric Caddis played with Scar. Tony McGee went on and played for Cincinnati. Doug Karsh, who is now the broadcaster, had Doug Marsh had a couple touchdowns against Notre Dame when it was Leach versus Montana. I think Marsh had 2. Funchess, Jeremy Tooman, the 97 champ. Benny Joppru still on there. Just down here, Butt had 4. Nick Eubanks from just a couple years ago. I liked Eubanks. And then Loveland, 4 touchdowns. Can he double the number and 1 and get more than 8 touchdowns? That is the question. So if I am going to make a prediction, even though I think Michigan is only going to throw for 135 yards per game, I think the receptions, I think he can get there. The receiving yards, when I think of run after the catch, I think about Loveland against Ohio State, not last year, but the year before. I think about touchdowns. I think about 2 years ago against Purdue, the first catch in the Big Ten championship game. He is there. You just got to give him the ball. I think all 3 of these are doable. 54 catches, 750 yards. and 9 touchdowns for Colston Loveland. There we go. That's it. Can Klein hold off the youngsters for the new number 2 tight end spot? Michigan stacked at tight end. They play not only Colston and Klein, but Bredesen. All three of those guys are going to play. And then when you're talking about the youngsters, I don't know, you got Tonelli and Marshall. They're deep and talented at tight end. It's the one part when you think about, well, yeah, Michigan's got to replace a lot on offense. And I don't think that Orji, the best version, at least as I think about it, and from what I've seen from him just in the spring game, watching him throw the ball, thinking about how he is going to throw the ball, what the game plan is going to be. There's going to be a lot of short passes that Alex Orji, they're going to try to get him in a rhythm, which is smart. That's what you do. You started that in the spring game, and then you missed a few. Everybody was groaning. I got it myself. I detected in the spring game the tight ends, 6'5", 250, dragging across that the field at their size, and Orji hitting them, and then those guys running after the catch. And Michigan doesn't just have Loveland; they've got Klein. Who knows if it's going to be Marshall or Tonelli? Who knows if it's going to be Priest, Corner, or who knows? But Michigan's got a glutton. That's not good. They're stacked. They're deep at tight end. I think you're going to see a lot of that. Andre says, if we're only passing for 135 a game, sorry, Dennis, we're in trouble. I'll be shouting for Davis Warren from every rooftop. No, you won't, Andres. If Orji's running for 75 yards and 2 touchdowns and throwing for 135 in a score against Texas, you're going to be shouting his name from the top of the rooftops for the Heisman. That's what you're going to be doing. I would just go back, you look at all the numbers and, there's yards and everything, and I've kind of do it myself. Just look at JJ over the last 2 years. Look at Milroe from Alabama, who Orji gets compared to. And you look at some of the games that they have, and they're winning, and not even the big games, but some of the other games. It's not like J.J. McCarthy was out there lighting it up every time he was out there. J.J. threw the ball 16 times last year in the game against Nebraska. He threw it 21 times against Rutgers. A lot of the games, it was like that. He threw 20 times against Minnesota. Those were the first 3 Big Ten games. That's how much he was throwing the ball. So it's more how they're doing running the ball. That's Michigan. That's smash. JJ didn't throw the ball at all in the second half against Penn State. I don't care myself if Alex Orji throws for 200 yards in any game this year. It's about, Harbaugh, the stat that he repeatedly said last year, which I think that they're thinking about this year, is points per possession. How many times when you're the quarterback did you take the team down and they get points? That's what he was about. He didn't care if they were throwing it. He didn't care if they were running it. As we know, they were running it a lot in there. And even though I like the 3 M's as the wide receivers, we just talked all about the tight ends. Michigan is about running the ball. I know it sounds boring. It gets boring. You can't, before 3 years ago, there would be a lot of people over here and that would be lining up saying, you're not going to win with that archaic kind of thinking. You're not going to be able to beat the big boys. You can't play with the SEC. You're not going to win a championship. Those were all the things that I think I was saying myself. I was saying it against Washington when Michigan was up 10-0 at the half. They said, let's see them come out and throw the ball. You got to be able to, this game is about getting the ball down the field. It's about throwing. People were, and we did it this year, and people were beside themselves that Michigan had a first round draft pick in JJ McCarthy, and he didn't throw the ball in the second half. It takes a little bit of an adjustment when you're looking at the numbers and you're thinking about Michigan, and then Orgy's not going to have a great completion percentage. Orgy's not going to be throwing the ball over 20 times a game. Orgy's going to be running it a lot himself. He's going to be handing the ball to Donovan Edwards. He's going to be giving it on an end around to Samaj Morgan. He's going to be bringing in Khalil Mullins to smash. I mean, you better get ready for that. Andres, get ready. LTM's better than 145. John, talking about running the ball getting boring. This is Michigan. Yeah. What's up, Darren? What's up? 135-yard passing. How's that making you feel? All right. So that's where we're at. I was going to look at some of the feedback. Shad says 180 is obtainable for Orgy at least. I think you're selling the kid short. Yeah, I'm not trying to, look, you could tune in. You could be someone, Rashad, that tuned in and watched this segment on Colston Loveland. You'd say, this guy's a complete homer. He thinks a team that can't throw, or is not going to throw the ball, and Loveland's going to have this hat trick of the season. He's going to have the greatest a season that a Michigan tight end's ever had. What's this guy on? And then I look at, you just put your numbers out there, you look at them, you adjust them, then you see what happens. I'd say for me, Chad, it's not like I hope Alex Orgy throws for 300 yards a game. It's my best guess. It's how I'm putting it out there. I try to be realistic with all of it. And I really don't when it comes to making predictions. I'm not trying to put too much of a, Michigan maize and blue glasses on it, or I'm a big Michigan homer, or I'm part of the team, or I'm saying we, or, like a lot of these broadcasts, will do. And it's fine. It works for them. They're very successful. The people like it. My style is taking a look at it and coming up with what I think is going to happen and how I think it's going to happen. And then you go for there. But I get what you're saying that I'm selling them short. Am I really selling them short if I think that Michigan is going 10-2 this year, and I think he's going to start all 12 games, and I think he's going to rush for 12 touchdowns, and that Michigan makes the college football playoff? I don't know. Jim, so I would argue that I'm not selling him short. Am I, in your eyes, am I selling him short as a passer? Okay, that's all right. Scar has jumped in on the feedback. He says, I'm hoping one of these tight ends block as well as AJ did last year. Scar says that a lot. So there we go. Are you saying 145 is better than 144? What's up? There we go. This is a good point. Tight end receptions, along with wide receiver receptions, are very, very quarterback dependent. Good point. Scrap all that. No. It's still fun. Loveland could put up. What if JJ was back? Those numbers would be happening. That's for sure. Let's see. I still think, being the number one guy there, it's achievable. And if I was betting the hat trick, I would be getting something like, like plus 850 or something. It would be plus 850. It's not like, it's a likely thing. I am calling my shot on that, despite the low number of passing yards that I still think Loveland is going to set the records in those three spots. Take it. There we go. That's where I'm at. Okay. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you. If you want to continue this Michigan talk, I like talking about Michigan all the time. I'll be over on the Den and the Maize and Blue Review. That's the posting board there. And I'll be seeing what the people have to say. And if I don't see a lot of posts about things that I'm interested in and talking about, well, then I'll post something myself and see what kind of reaction I get, and then we'll go all day, all night. So that's how it goes. Everybody have a great rest of the Monday. Stay cool. Thanks for watching. That'll do it, and we will talk with you on Wednesday. Smash that like button.